Vitaly, thank you to Ukraine.
I'm floating. The first glory.
What American President Donald Trump is saying is that an oyster is planned with Vladimir Putin. Budapest has an announcement of specific dates. Well, we will lead the US sanctions with a direct, not about the two largest Russian naphtha companies, Rosneft and Lukoil. I will briefly quote again, saying the President of America, once again I dilute we do not lead, and President Donald Trump does not lead, saying oysters with NATO Secretary General Markert, I was just discussing, and the mayor is not negotiating, including the proclamation of sanctions became known on the coming day, after Trump announced that an oyster with Russian President Vladimir Putin was planned for the appointed term. And on Wednesday, Russia with Disney intends bombard Ukraine on bent, including footage of bombard in Kharkov just on his hands endured, and reaction on the proth that Rocky style, tearing off Vitalia. These sanctions go overgrown, saying Donald Trump, at a discount, Vago and Kroc. We insanely pointed out once again that we need the most economical claim.
Well, we don't give up that we talked about the fact that Donald Trump is early Chipiznu confused, yet. Not as a tool to float on Putin, but on another. And Putin early Chipizno scooping out, I said the stock of drains, I have tough ideas on the side of the president. With the received in the state. We can also say for the drain of Putin, the mind of Trump, and such tough dips, it is clear that the Russian Federation is months away. But in fact a diplomatic record. Because Trump has gone early, Chipizno. Putin paid it to him for an oyster upon completion in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front, and such a rank can be preppy. And do an economical searchlight. And I'm not up to the truth, I'm Putin, Propanov Trump, but he just instilled aggressive guilt against neighboring Ukraine for him. You will immediately unravel on economical projects and on Tilka. Not with the fact that Putin will preserve control over both territories and grabbers. There is also a Propanova in the knowledge of the Russian status of the Crimea from all sanctions, not assets. Trump all ambushes the counselor are still rational minds for the president of Ukraine, yak for Rocky Popel can't stick his head out. At the help of subsidies. And Putin is absolutely point of sight. Putin has also been imprisoned for a long time, and Putin still needs it. Trump has an acute reaction. And now Trump has overgrown, saying that the hour has already come, and such a situation has begun with the escalation of the Russian-American. It's also you who have balked today's speech of the President of Russia, some American-European sanctions, then a tough, obvious and laying out both to the President from the United States and the European leader.
On the was, Putin's words about tomahawks have a serious reaction. After all, the United States is important to reset this format about sanctions.
Both that and the fact that Europeans need Russian toilets. The fact that an important reaction was rendered in Putin's style. You notice that fixing Putin is wet in the toilet. I'm behind the 25 hands of the board, not marking progress. You are now in the framework of a closet.
So,
You will become, I would say, I said about the wall vocabulary, and with the department of his incredible discord. The fact that Yak is an officer of the sovereign carelessness of the failures of the task. He had a specific task. With a compliment and statements and words, a well-thought-out object. The kind of dicky can cause serious, I would say, sovereign interests of the Russian Federation. Namaga everything, Namaga all 9 months, he has a way out for all the failures. Of course, Putin has a colonel in the Union. Men are nothing up to.
of course, it would still be known to us that Trump allegedly came to Schvid before the decision from raising the State of America sanctions and Trump.
The fact that Rational Pete and Sasha are still the logical way out of the situation. Instilled minds nor escalation. One moment, the moment is important not to give up. In Washington, both Biden's frequent and Trump's frequent may be wondering and even unsolicited results. Let's say, but the sanctions for Provagine, India and China illegally purchased Russian NAFTA, and Putin continued the war. The Russians are just ready to tighten the pasta and will continue to use the style, discounts from the point of view of their president. It will be necessary for Ukraine to come from a neighboring Russia and a power with a political and, I think, ethnographic map. Something with the received staff. In the same place, he said that he would be taken away. It is rich who of our pedos Reva that Putin needs the whole of Ukraine. Yeah, he won't let Putin have all of Ukraine. Discounts once a day, I will repeat again, Putin needs the whole of Ukraine. Tell me his camp is not I do not know. Yak rich people put rejections skeptically true Yak rich people called Putin still see the Crimea and the Donbass. I do not know this Odessa. That there is generally Kharkiv. And once he calms down and hears at rest. And I know that proving is not the head idea of all these stories, so that the troops stand in Uzhgorod. So that they come through the Carpathians, and not Kharkiv to Donetsk to Sevastopol. And now you know that Trump knows, and I also know myself. I don't read classified documents. And Trump is reading. I am not just given intelligence services, I would say, on the letterheads of the Rada of the Russian Federation. It says I love you. Moreover, I am guilty of the Ukrainian nationalist regime. And I am responsible for the territory from the regions of Ukraine to the Russian Federation. And it is painted on the hands. From the map of the temple districts, the eyelids will be closed to the Russian Federation on the territory of Kalyshnaya, Ukraine. Extremely with the receipt of the United States, you cannot admit that they are on the most serious geopolitically 20. Extremely on the same, Israel is still visible to the Hamas, but they are similar. And this is a serious torture, and in order not to date Putin at that time with the received staff in the true. The sky is still in the conflict, and all these discharges are behind hanging out. As the Russian Federation is characterized by a potential nuclear discharge, and I'm sticking in Ukraine. And can be asked for a prominent strike from a nuclear component on the territory temple objects from the received states. Let's tell him in Europe. That no one knows. The chain of torture of the offensive guilt is still with the received staff is not in date. I will accept Putin economically. And the president of the Russian Federation escalated the confrontation with the sunset. Supposedly Tilk Polib, I live with a skin Tijnik new month, and a rock of Russian-Ukrainian guilt. Wine scale. Go to the territories to extract new forms, and a scale and character unknown to us yet. That's how I'll be.
And who is the biggest threat and overgrown on your mind? And I just thought that I'm with the truth. And we have among our Hermod Yankee think that I'm in Russia. We send him our missiles. About Putin and hitting our children in cages, but not like that. His escalation with a cob of guilt from the 2014, and not me, not swimming in on us.
Because the very idea that you will see the aggressor, you can fly like this. Practical, you know, the road to the gas chamber. Supposedly they pass by themselves, you have no one at the Ministry of Internal Affairs. And I mark the idea in the network, not for the first time. It is not possible to squeeze Putin, like the idea of the word. And our rank and the president also marks it, and we sing the ghost of Putin at a discount. So that God forbid not to imagine and Putin. Trump has not been for a long time, though greedy meek, Tilka is still Neobraz and Putin. And Putin, well, so Zagoli, I would say, constructed. Another sample of it is not compressed, the straight line is turned off as a sign of weakness. On Putin's construction, I would say, the whole philosophy of the Russian political and whiskey culture, I have not yet been threatened with such a gangster. I have not yet seen. So they are afraid, so we are hearing them. This is a kind of Bachu in Russia, from everyday situations to political ones. For tens, hundreds of times. Am I that you're getting dusty and don't want cotton wool? On the images from the physical, you just stand and clip, and just starts to get your feet. It is not necessary to live in Russia, for which you can make a movie like I'm a book. Well, why are we not now in contact with the Russian Federation, with Russia like this? The yaks know the Russian one, they have beaten the impersonal Russian old man, and have read an impersonal Russian books, which we allow to deceive. And it's written in simple Russian. Well,
Who will show more guilt for Vitalia on your Dumka, can expand and can, but the victims look like, I mean, Putin can cast his own clothes as well.
candidates for scaling up Ukraine in Central Europe and the Baltic states. Our broadcast became aware of the fact that the Russian temples were destroyed and the windy stretch of the Republic of Lithuania. From the territory of the Kaliningrad region. One episode is literally just Bizia for Sprat, praise of our Ratsmova. There have already been discounts on such episodes. And the army droned on the windy, just for European Ukrainians, and in Estonia. I think that they will have hybrid forms of war thoroughly, and there will be a pro-Russian attitude in the Ukrainians. They can be yak for the Rakunak links by the ultra-right forces, and yaks are ready to infect fuck and Putin. And for the Rakota of the midvert of pro-Russian forces, in the greatest saying in the folded and chained regions of Ukraine Europe. and by stitch. And for me we show. Tell you what. There are elections in Estonia, in our Ukraine. But it is known that behind him, the mainstream press stream media, those elections were tell them that together Narva. And so often think about the leak, where Russian saboteurs can come out. So here in that place for his with the moronic Russian Muvni population and the Russian ethnic population. The notebook of the pro-Russian politician Stoynukin, led by himself, saying that he also seems to have declared the interests of the Estonian state. Sprats with Narvi are extremely less than half, there is still there, and having said so, a disintegrating warehouse of fees. And voted for, and because of the politicians I recommended. The axis in the memory of the bucket is 1940th, Rick Kola Moscow. For the policy of collaborators in the Baltic, Ukraine was able to organize a pseudo-parliamentary decision about eating Ukraine to the Motherland Union. Occupy. Well, here's a great illustration for you, a little, again, and not noticeable. And from such small illustrations, you can paint a plan away from Russian subversive ideas, but it was an open fault.
And yet, this is still not enough for obtaining the state of America, and so we are in vain. With the truth a small effect, we seem to be looking at Russia, and in the future. Maybe so. Us Treasury Secretary Scott said just Putin on the company finances the Kremlin's whiskey machine and is overgrown for an hour. He laughs about the toilets and the sanctions on their economy. America and the documents, and, of course, Trump's greatest hour with the leader of China. In their applications for what will help. I'm into the topic of everything in regulating the situation from Ukraine and Russia.
You know, I read for the wound, let's say, to the Indian media, that the applications are applications, of course, but what is important is the real-looking pictures of the Indian reaction to the Autopriority complex to Trump's decision. And I can tell you that Trump is talking about India's reaction, about the fact that India can buy Russian. This is, I would say, the political reality today. The fact that those sanctions for the rights are not against the enterprises of Rosneft and Lukoil. Let's not forget that a serious blow to Putin is symbolic. The fact that Rosneft Corporation is allegedly created by the gentry in the Yukos Corporation, a private corporation. And Rosneft is a sovereign corporation. And Rosneft was actually prompted by the insinuated Maanichi Nabe with Putin's associates in St. Petersburg and Sechin. So Putin's, and not just like that. Here. And you do with the arrival of the Kremlin, and Rosneft is just specifically their Klondike. Now, TPPR Indian Pidpremstvo just can't Zakopivit and cars Rosneft and Lukoil, because otherwise it can trap. And serious penalties to the United States, and in the banking Rachunki can just look through and again. And in India, they declare, after reading all the interviews, that they will be reformatted. We bought Russian naphtha by the look of yes in the Kazavok of the Indian row. That is, this is how the whole form sounds. And in the Indian city of Shokova, you don't know, you can have the Prime Minister on the render fashion Vav his Padorush. At the ASEAN summit to Malaysia. Devon can be exaggerated without Donald Trump. But in New Delhi to continue to enter into, and received by the states in a new feature. So India action may know that the French have purchased Russian, for Russia is still hanging out to China. I don't think it's going to be that easy there. It is obvious that the theme of Russia and Chinese Russia and I will swim into the bags with the received states alone with the head themes. Once Trump, Xi Jinping in Malaysia is still in the oyster. And Xi Jinping knows perfectly well that he still wants to find a balance with the received states. They did not give Russian NAFTA. So nothing would happen. Shuka bought legal tools. Meaning Shvidka war. Not Russia, and, of course, there were no greedy new sanctions in the Trump administration until the hour. Trump is obviously overjoyed. I'm for politics, I'm on that 9 months, actually having done everything with Putin on the edge. He was belittled, he was exposed as a loser in front of the imperious and familiar with the Cobb in Anchorage. And it's not enough for us to go to organize a telephone conversation with Putin from an oyster in Budapest, because Putin himself is for Trump. And Putin himself for the car Trump, you deciding that on his pogroms and propositi Putin. That with a slave in shot down realistic day. And it also turned out that Putin was Shukov him again, a gift to the Ukrainian delegation, looking not tasty for Trump. I respect the triumph. A lawsuit against Russia with the skin to any specific conclusion of the Russian-Ukrainian war. Russia notify the situation, and it's easier to tell all American officials on not on fire, on the initiative and Trump. Russia, I think, is on its tilky to escalate the situation. Both here and within Europe.
You respect, and I don't swim into the Russian Federation, and I don't own them.
They will have and will have namaga for the guilt of Ukraine by the gentry of escalation and scale. Not a nobleman. Today I have clearly written to the pegged president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, the intercessor of the head of the Rada. On the battlefield, not at the desk. And we don't know about the scale of the battlefield on the feet and the food on Russia's economy. I am not for the pumped-up germination, war and European guilt is not in nature.
Sanctions the European Union profits and hangs out, and bought Russian on auto products. As far as I've read there since 2020.
You haven't given up yet, you bought Russian gas 2026.
Hanging out at 2020. But here the torture is that.
Of course, I am not yet Europe pipeline Russian gas, and will not be on Russian gas. Do you know what Gazprom will be doing?
Well, we Ukrainians would literally be the 25th of the new less in 2026.
The balance of energy interests in Europe, and it is still thought out. You can just go to the energy bankruptcy of Europe. But so simple looking gas.
Yeah.
And you and I will not buy gas at the moment, and it is seriously difficult for Ukraine itself. We can just cut the forks ourselves.
It's not that simple.
It was not just that Europe in Zagoli revealed such energy deposits in Russia, but Donald Trump's term. The adoring Europe of Russian pipeline gas marks a record short term that everyone thought everyone would be there 27, 28, 29th lesson of the process, all for the future. Gas pipelines to Europe. Beer stream, Tilke. The fact that we are guessing about them, about their Pedras. And PPR came to part to say goodbye to the stolen gas. Russian. And then there's another problem, another head, how should I say it, a head alternative to Russia on the topic of the market. I am Qatar. And for those pennies, of course, finances a terrorist organization is running out. There are serious university problems here, and I'm just surprised at the same time. I'm a secretary. Who said that she would be available to Trump and Jinping's Oyster Wednesday?
Well, here we know anything can be rich with the truth, and the Crimea is served by Trump to empty, and Xi Jinping about laying down agreements with China even before the nuclear reset. Vladimir Putin, who proposed the idea of bilateral shortening of the nuclear reset, and the PERC can improve the process. And what does it mean, Vitaly? For us specifically, can it mean
nothing? I will not eat food and Trump, because the nuclear arsenals of the People's Republic of China are not from the nuclear arsenal of the Russian Federation obtained in the state in America, with the received states and Russia and the head, nuclear and over the extinction, and with the participation of the 20th and 25, and China before the numbers publicly. It is necessary to build richly on wired Ukrainians. Tom will tell Trump that you are from Russia with a cob. And that is, we will be able to be on par with you. And about the parity of nuclear charges, this is China. But then, the Russian Federation uses a nuclear parasol, and for a nuclear China, there is still China in its arsenal.
And I have already asked your question further. I also wanted to say more about the sanctions of Europe. They're not the 18th package. Recently, the European Ukraine Stilke has long voted there.
I don't give up the 19th package. Package 19.
And there and Austria was also overgrown. He changed his mind, and the package from those received in the state in America.
I think that the American position of the sanctions bill, something to throw off, seriously floating on the European leaders, on the leaders of the negative forever, may not be up to Donald Trump himself, and choke. Trump, seriously criticizing Spain in the tax budget. And here you are literally not giving up a day for today. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez, leading Spain, I will come before the program, bought a European reset, and for Ukraine, then for a rich who would be Crocs for Ukraine. And for subscribing to Russia, the VRAC position of President Trump, and such Trump friends, and Putin's friends overnight. I am Viktor Orban, Robert Fitz, and on two styles at the time of an acute conflict between Putin's Trump. So let the conflict help, and the fact that Putin's allies, and in Europe, have a richly fallow look of Trump, not Putin.
And also given. You gave Putin. And the fact that of course there are two sides and Trump, that I will have these sanctions for a long time. And we will sit down and talk in Budapest. Well, allegedly not in Budapest. And you are teasing that those sanctions are serious problems for Russia. Give up.
To Russia. Russia, in turn, is escalating the scale. And Putin in those situations does not have to jump out of the economic potential. The economical potential of propy in the fire on the Russian-Ukrainian front of objective minds in order for an economical and possible military side with the received states of the account of the waste of Ukraine's discharge from the discharge, and the escalation of the Rizny type on the side of the Russian Federation of washing can produce in Europe the need for it seriously. Because I would say Trump's willingness to be harshly turned on Putin and Putin's willingness, I would say. His firm political style, in principle, will threaten real guilt just like that, and the diagnosis, it's not a topic for discussion.
You said in one of the behaviors.
So let's also consider Putin's economic potential with the wound of the holy wine deputy. I've been reset for a long time. My right to hope for a foundation.
And can we measure out the prospect of dying out in our hands? Well, in a month, I would like to. Potential.
The presidential term of President Trump.
Then now he is already rich in our truth.
So, which requires an intense, serious, and at 1 hour. The more the economic potential of the President of the Russian Federation is mixed up, the more he will have to take the whole of Europe with him to the grave.